Chris, when people think about businesses that really focus on sustainability, they usually associate it with a loss of money or lack of profitability. But as a serial climate tech entrepreneur, you obviously disagree with this claim. So can you tell us a bit why you focused specifically on that type of business and what got you into the field?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in sort of the sustainability business for about 20 years. So I got into solar power back in 2005. And the reason being is I wanted to, work on things that make the world a better place. I know that sounds like a cliche, but it's really true. Because back in engineering school, we started the recycling program back then, and then I graduated and I got into the different industries that were not sustainable focused, and I always thought there was something missing. So in 2005, I decided to make a change, and that sort of ballooned to me saying, well, going from working at a company to saying, well, what if I do this myself? And then, then we started looking at, the first business was in solar energy, residential solar energy. We started a company called Pure Energies back in 2010. And the idea was to, not look at it like it's a loss leader, but like, how do we make this profitable residential solar? So, in that case, we were paying clients to host solar panels on the roof, and we were collecting, the electrons and selling it back to the grid. So everybody kind of went out in that situation. And that morphed into a business of us, not installing the systems, but really just selling customers on the concept of using solar power to mitigate their electricity bills. So actually making it, beneficial to the clients as well as to the solar panel owners. That's the solar instance, and then you get into Carbicrete, which is, um, one of my latest ventures here, where we're making concrete without cement. So we're using steel slag in place of cement, which is a industrial waste byproduct. So people are throwing out steel slag or paying it to have taken away, and we're curing it with carbon dioxide. So we're solving a few problems. We're getting rid of cement, which is a massive polluter. It's like it's about 4% of all greenhouse gas emissions, the manufacturing of cement. So we've gotten rid of that particular part of the emissions. And then furthermore, we're making a product that you can sell. So like it's not just a cost center as you refer to. It's a product that you could sell and use to build homes or pave or use as paving stones. And then the third thing is that we're actually taking CO2 and we're getting rid of it because it's permanently bonding to the steel slag and becoming a carbonate. So it'll be completely harmless for hundreds of thousands of years. So, while a lot of people think that sustainable minded businesses are cost centers, in all the ventures that I've started, we're basically presenting it as a way to make money and, creating some climate wealth. The My latest venture is Garma Energy, which is a thermal energy developer. So we're going to take off-peak electricity, and instead of storing it in electrochemical batteries like lithium-ion batteries, we're going to store the electricity in the form of heat. Because 50% of the world's energy requirements are in heat, and 50% of those requirements are industrial heat. So, big factories need a lot of heat, and we're going to use, inexpensive overnight electricity to store the heat, or unloved electrons from renewables that are overproducing. So yeah, that's my answer to why look at these things and make them profitable.
I'm curious about the latest company that you started. I mean, you mentioned that you were storing energy in a completely different way, storing energy in heat. And I still don't grasp that concept. So how does that actually work?
Can you imagine like a big thermos, okay, like a double-walled container made of steel and heavily insulated. So two layers of insulation, two layers of steel, and filled with a storage material. So the storage material can be steel slag, it could be iron slag, it could be iron ore, but it's basically little rocks. And so you have an electric heater on one side, which is powered by renewables or off-peak electricity, that blows hot air into this thermos, 800 degrees C, so it's super hot. and then you charge it. So you basically you keep feeding heat into this, and the rocks itself, or the the steel slag, iron slag, whatever the material is, we're tech agnostic. It heats up, and then when electricity becomes expensive again, or you don't have any waste heat to heat this thing up, you turn off the supply of heat, and then you start releasing it when you need it. So you could keep it in that, we'll call it the thermos, for a couple of days, and then you can release it afterwards to boil steam, heat a room up, heat up thermal oil, anything. So one of the processes that the industry uses.
I mean, this is fascinating. So, Chris, how do you come up with, like, talk to me about the ideation process. Like, you have these completely different companies. So, what makes you say, you know what, this is a good idea. I'm going to pursue this, even though I'm already busy with everything else. I mean, I still have time to open a new company, and I feel like this is another great opportunity. Can you tell me, like, what's the mindset behind it? What's the process? Is it like financial planning? Is it you're looking ahead 5, 10 years?
Yeah, it's all that. You basically make a business plan, but just let's take for the example, um, the concrete, Carbicrete. I looked at this back in 2015. I said, okay, wow. And in 2015, nobody was really thinking about, like cement and concrete as a major contributor to climate change. But, when you read the actual information, you're like, wow, we should tackle this. And so you look at it and say, well, you can take a waste byproduct, steel slag, which is sent to landfill normally, and you can use that to replace cement, which is a huge polluter and costs a lot of money to produce. And furthermore, you can actually embed CO2 into the product. So you have like three benefits right there, and you can sell the product. I said, this is a no-brainer, right? And then and as you go on in time, this actually becomes lower in cost. So it has all these benefits. It's lower in cost and it produces the same result. That's why, we move forward with Carbicrete. And Carbicrete, has raised all kinds of money and has been deployed in Quebec, Ontario, and will be deployed in France later this year. So, the idea is caught on. In terms of Garma, so thermal storage, the idea was, I was contacted after, about a year and a half ago saying, we've got this idea to do this. And, as you dig in, you're like, well, this is a no-brainer too, because like, why are people storing energy in the form of electrochemical batteries, which are expensive and can explode, and you need permits to install them, when you can store it in something like, like a hot box of rocks, basically, when 50% of your requirements are in heat. Like you might as well do something that's simpler and way less expensive. So storing heat in the form of heat is about one-fourth or one-fifth the cost of storing electrons electrochemically. So it makes sense. It makes economic sense. So coming back to your first question, you have to look at these things and say, yeah, this is an excellent way to decarbonize or it's very sustainable, but does it make economic sense? And you always have to look at things in that view. How does it make economic sense? It might not make sense today, it could be next year, but you need to see the pathway, how to get there. And in all these cases, we did. Uh, so that's how we sort of, I've chosen these paths is to make sure that there's an economic viability to this. Like you have to remember that people, and this is like a simplistic way of looking at it, like nobody, you don't have like a million, like everybody buying Priuses yet. Like there's only like some people, and then as it becomes economically viable, which it has been, then the electric car really took off. Like if you factor in all the operating expenses to a gas car versus electric car, you start looking at electric cars as an actually lower cost advantage. So it takes time, but you need to sort of build them for a long time. And in all these situations, whether it's thermal storage or carbon negative concrete, you have to get some velocity and some real products out there and start building at scale. And this is when the cost competitiveness comes in and it becomes less expensive than regular the status quo.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think your analogy with the cars is makes total sense to me. I mean, going back to your company, if you just go and tell people that, yeah, it will store CO2 for a long period of time, but it's 10 times the price, people are going to say, okay, I like the idea, but I'm not willing to pay that much for this. So we always have to keep the balance. So which brings me to my next question. So what kind of pushback do you get when introducing when you're pushing your new companies or introducing your new companies? Do you feel like people get excited about this innovation, but then they're unsure if it's as reliable as the traditional methods? So maybe talk to me a bit about the reactions that you get.
Yeah, I mean everyone's super interested all the time, right? Like they, oh, okay, well this is going to cost me less, but will it do the same job? That's always the question. Like what is the risk? Because people are definitely always trying to eliminate risk from their lives or from their companies, so they don't want to take on an additional risk. But there are some folks and some companies out there that are looking to innovate and take that next step. Because when you become a leader, then you can actually um, you can take part in the benefits from being one of the first. So there is always some form of pushback, either from the client side or from regulatory, or somebody's always got something to say.
Chris, what's your next big milestone? What are you looking forward to? It's just been 2 months since you launched your brand new company. Is that your main focus right now?
Yeah,
Growing this?
it's my main focus right now. We're going to grow this into like, a leader here in Canada and also in Europe. And the idea is to basically implement many different technologies of thermal storage. And we're tech agnostic, so we're not developing any specific technology. And that's based on my experience in solar as well. I mean, the people that have done well in solar have been, finding customers and selling electrons, not the people building panels. So the same idea, like we're looking to sell heat, or we're looking to find clients that want to buy systems that provide heat, rather than, making the best new heat storage system, because there's going to be always one person that's better than the next one, if you know what I mean. So the idea is to be tech agnostic. So focus on that, find clients, build it in Canada, build in this eventually in the States, and build it in Europe.
So
Yeah,
Chris,
yeah,
uh, thank
appreciate
you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time and I think it's very important what you're doing.
appreciate that, Antoine. It's been wonderful to speak with you today.